My Minecraft experience was flipped on its head when I was challenged to attempt to play in a world with just the one block. I have to somehow manage to get to the end and defeat the Ender Dragon within 100 days. However, you see this one block eye, it is in fact magic when you play this challenge world created by IGA Minecraft. And let me explain how it works while we transition into day 1. Transition. Thankfully, explaining how this challenge works is a whole lot easier when the talking block decides it's time for a wee tutorial. As I'm sure you've clocked already, whenever I break this block I'll simply just regenerate. And that's why it has a self-proclaimed title as the Infinite Block, which is a very fitting description. But you might be left wondering what actually dictates the resources the one block can regenerate into once you've actually broke it. Well, the one block can regenerate into a different block, a chest with unique loot inside. Well, the one block can regenerate into a different block, a chest with unique loot inside of it, or even a mob when you break it. The pool of items chosen from is entirely dependent on what phase you're in. There is 10 phases in total. Okay, well technically there's actually 11 because we're in a tutorial phase right now, which is phase 0, then it's a list through 1 through 10 and the actual list of phases, but we'll just say there's 10 because that's like easier to say. Anyway, all 10 of these phases will resonate closely to either a biome, a clear standard playthrough progression point, or even a dimension that's in a regular Minecraft world, which will of course add to the pool of resource the one block can regenerate to upon breaking. It's about time I talk about the tutorial phase we're currently in, as we've been shown on a few occasions now that with this system of regeneration, blocks that are affected by gravity like sand or gravel fall straight to the void. The game teaches us to combat this by getting a water bucket to place a block underneath the one block to act as a safety net to catch those blocks. And this is obviously one of the most key items we will ever get across these 100 days. Enough about key items though, as that was a key piece of information that's just flashed by on screen. More specifically, it was the heart particles that were surrounding a chest. Those heart particles signify the benevolent gift is spawned in front of us, which means we're basically at the end of a phase and breaking it will start the next phase. So yeah, that does mean we complete the tutorial on our very first day and we get to start up phase 1, which is called the plains, with a bunch of new cool stuff potentially spawning. If you're wondering what cool new stuff could actually entail, we'll do a wee bit of analysis. That would see us begin with a phase title, which is the plains, which is actually a common biome in a regular Minecraft playthrough. It's a very visually recognisable one at that, and it's the basic regular simple grasslands environment, which means by mining the one block in this particular phase will grant us many of the resources one would find at this stage of the game, such as a healthy supply of grass / dirt, because grass is kind of the same thing to us as we don't have silk touch anyway. We get the occasional log of wood, and you've already seen the creme de la creme of this phase, of course, the animals. These wee creatures being brought into existence to keep us company on our lonesome one block is such a blessing. Especially so as the infinite block is kind enough so far anyway to give us pairs of these animals in such close proximity to one another. Obviously, touch wood, if we can keep the little guys safe, this should guarantee us the resource they provide to be completely replenishable and renewable. I must say though, tempting them into this work in progress pen was a massive hurdle that sunk a lot of time early on. We kinda just had to brute force and hope the pathfinding logic worked in our favour, as we're missing a lot of the key items that we need to encourage these animals to follow us, as we didn't have items like wheat and we didn't have our hands on a lead to work around these problems. One problem I don't think we could have ever worked around was a sheep who defies the laws of Minecraft, as you saw me jump against that fence gate to guarantee they were in the pen, right? Apparently no, as that's not even enough anymore to guarantee, as they'll simply just jump over the closed fence gate because that's just a thing the sheep does for some reason. Obviously the only explanation of such a thing is there's some god of mischief messing with the cogs of this world behind the scenes. Thankfully though, there's another god that's doing the exact same thing but turned them back into our favour, as the god of nature blessed us with some good news on our second day as a tree grew from our very own sapling. Before we even actually cut down this tree though, we started planting down all the crops we had at our disposal so we could try to appease and calm this rebel sheep and his associates from causing any more mischief as soon as possible. That task didn't keep us occupied for very long, unlike the task of a gradual staircase made up of wooden slabs. This took far longer than I'm ever willing to admit to even build. Thankfully though, there was an unintended side effect of this, which was all the new animals spawning absolutely loved to pathfind themselves directly into the totally planned one-way entrance to the pen. This completely stopped all escape attempts when I was opening the gate to let new animals inside. To finish off an incredibly productive second day, we finished the plains phase off and were greeted to the benevolent gift. The timer for phase 2 has begun, which means once it reaches 0, the game enlightened us to information about the underground phase. We don't need to do analysis this time, as I found out there's a button to show me all the new potential resource encounters that are added to the pool from this point forwards. There's a wee bit of a better look at some of them now. Are these new resources enough to tempt me into another full mining infinite block day grind for all of day 3? No, but that was always going to be an impossible task. I was dead set on expanding the wee staircase I built into a sizable platform, as one day I want to have a safe place to call my home in this world / island location. By the time I actually found myself back in front of the one block again, there was mere minutes left in the remainder of day 3. Yeah, it seems good things come to those who wait, so we're greeted to another new animal for our pen, which was called the mushroom. Because of this run of good luck, I couldn't distract myself very long before returning to try my luck once again. But that nearly ended in tragedy, and I don't know what I would have done with myself if a creeper did destroy my land. Wait, what? That had a question mark at the end of that sentence, but the creeper was clearly dealt with. Why on earth is there a wait? What? No! Anyway, to cheer ourselves up, we banded together some of our leftover cobblestone to piece together our very first furnace and smelt our very first bit of iron. We of course invest in the most crucial tool in all of Minecraft straight away, and we rush to use it. How's this here and go again? Is it curiosity killed the mushroom? Why on earth is that in the script? Wait, no! We rushed back to the game of chance to attempt to wipe away our sorrows, but instead these strange businessmen tried to sell me their stylish leather hats, which apparently worked as some sort of protective sunscreen bubble around their body by just wearing the hat on its own. At least that's what I assumed they were saying, as I couldn't quite understand them, but their arms certainly weren't burning despite, you know, being out in the sun. Wipe away that waterfall of grieving tears, however, as before I even finished saying that zombie bit, we got another 2 mushrooms born from the gracious infinite block onto our land already. It's like the game already knew how incompetent I was, although I don't want to rely on Lady Luck taking pity on us from this point onwards, so it was a top priority to populate more mushrooms as quick as possible. Sadly, this declaration wasn't noted anywhere, and I immediately forgot after being sidetracked by a wandering trader spawning in my rubbled beginnings of a home. I stared deeply at the pale oak saplings I desperately wanted, but I couldn't seem to manifest the emeralds from thin air into my inventory to actually buy them. I did a wee bit more housework before realising I have yet another woodblock variant in my back pocket that I could be using. So obviously I went ahead and planted my dark oak saplings all around the place. In terms of the actual home, I will only say what the theme of the home is, because it doesn't really have a direct theme, it's more so what the blocks I pick represent. It'll make more sense later, so I didn't worry too much about it. What I need to worry a lot about though is the most infuriating mob in Minecraft. That mob is obviously the Phantom. It was never going to be any other mob, and it decided to rear its head to stop our momentum in building. That obviously forced our hand in investing some of the wool we gathered with the shears into a bed to stop the wee menaces from spawning. Along with a 2-in-1 investment of an iron axe to deal with the phantoms less swarming and to help us gather up wood that wee bit quicker. Once again, with no long left on the clock of a day, albeit this time the day read day number 6, we hit the end of yet another phase. We could proudly declare ourselves as champions as we bested the underground with a cool map found inside a benevolent gift to celebrate it. I heard it's incredibly normal to be dumbfounded by a piece of paper after harness all your brain energy into working out why it isn't big like normal. Eventually a great discovery was made that unfurling a piece of paper to be seen clearly is in fact easier if you use both of your hands. If that great discovery wasn't enough, here's another great discovery of all the things that are going to be found in Phase 3, the Icy Tundra. Believe it or no though, we didn't interact with any of that new fancy stuff anytime soon, because there was actually something on that list that was sending me into a spiral. You might be wondering what even terrified me to this extent. Something so terrifying that I feared so much that I spent an entire day building yet another wooden platform just in the name of a precaution. Well, this was the sole idea of a single fox spawning. Oh, and also during this day-long building session, I eventually realised that the dark oak saplings that I placed everywhere were kinda placed wrong. I done a quick Google search because they were taking a wee while to grow, and they apparently need to be in a 2x2 square to even grow in the first place. But look, the important thing is I actually noticed within a few days, so I'm not going to see any comments saying I'm a silly sauce for placing them wrong. Anyway, foxes, that was a topic, and the reality that I see that as me shaking in my suit, no my boots, is that foxes will hunt. More specifically, the foxes will hunt and kill other animals. At least that's what I was under the impression of. I know now while reading this script, well, not really a script, just a bunch of highlighted bullet points of different key events, but that doesn't matter. All I knew in Scatterbrain Pablo mode is that they hunted different animals. However, it's actually literally only just chickens they could hunt in our current pen, but I didn't know that at the time, okay? Instead, I just conjured up a definitive solution to preserve and separate each animal into a small shelter to guarantee each other's safety. You may ask, Pablo, why didn't you just, I don't know, make the fence your old pen 1 block higher and add a roof to protect all your animals at the same time in one build? You would be right to ask that. It would have saved a lot of time. However, the saga's in motion and it's already happened and we can't intervene, so we've just got to sit here and watch the massive dent in our time happen. I mean, all this really is just temporary housing, which is going to be ripped down once we have a proper farm area built anyway, so it's kind of just a waste of time. Thankfully, rational thinking slowly began to return upon encouraging the last few remaining animals into their shelters. The cogs started to move when I realised one specific animal was going to have to be treated very, very differently. That animal was actually a sheep, as I could theoretically keep it in a shelter, however, of course, would have no way to have grass that's growing in this wooden platform. So if I sheared these sheep, their wool would never regenerate because they would never eat grass again. So I would lose their renewability availability and replenishability of the resource, which is the whole reason I want to keep the animals safe in the first place. So the solution I came up with was a solution not to keep all my eggs in one basket. I mean, more so sheep's in one location, but you get the gist of it. 2 were to stay in the shelter and the other 2 were to stay in the initial pen with some glorious green grass to feast upon. But look, after such a long time thing, is it finally time for us to sink our teeth into the new phase? No, it's no. It's for a good reason this time, honest. It's because we finally have the resource for mining just a few snow blocks to make our very first infinite block farm. It may not quite be as strong as an infinite block farm when it's with lava and water and you get a bunch of cobblestone, but a snow golem giving us infinite snow is still infinite blocks, which is always a good thing in a challenge like this. I'm sure it must have been some twisted punishment for making the infinite block wait such a long time, as it very quickly fired multiple hostile strays at me as soon as I actually started to mine it again. These strays slowed me down as an obstacle and with a potion effect of slowness, so it was a 2-in-1 hit against us. Although I can't complain too much, as one of them dropped an iron helmet and I looked absolutely fabulous wearing it. As day 11 rolled around, we were met with another pair of unique animals. This time they were goats. So of course it meant we had to very quickly piece together yet another shelter. However, if you thought that white sheep escaping earlier was impressive, just have a look at this goat leaping about 6 or 7 blocks into the air just to cause me a wee bit of bother. What shouldn't cause me any bother though is the introduction of foxes to our island, as we've done our homework and we are prepared and there's not a chicken in sight for them to hunt. Or at least there wasn't. Aye, the cold variant of the chicken decided now was the perfect time to spawn from the 1 block. We quickly added an extra layer on a roof to our sheep pen to try put our chickens inside of that, but the fox kind of just wandered in and we kind of just trapped the fox instead of trapping the chicken. This gave us the opportunity to put the chicken in an actual pen, and the fox kind of could just stay with the sheep now that it was safely enclosed in the area. Let's talk about an occasion filled with joy and whimsy, which will put a smile right back onto our face. We had a chest that was born from the 1 block containing a very, very key item. An item that pretty much opens an entire new world for us. This item was an ice block, which after some cool dance moves and a little bit of time melted into water. Which is of course our second water source block, and I'm sure you already know that if we throw these 2 source blocks together in a 2x2 square, we can create an infinite water source. It's a resource we've been really lacking in since we've started. If my small, sad excuse for a farm could articulate words if it suddenly gained sentience, it would be saying all of the positive words that had in its vocabulary about this. Although maybe me and the real version of the farm and not the hypothetical one are a lot more alike than I thought, as a joyous occasion fell onto my lap and I didn't manage to spout any positive words either, and instead tried to interpret my emotions through dance as the 1 block gifted me a dog. If I can be honest, I'm not actually sure if the 1 bone tame was an attribute change in the back end of the 1 block spawn animal logic or if it was just fate. I'm gonna go with the narrative that it was fate, as I don't want to spoil the illusion by peeking behind the curtain. Anyway, after putting in more effort I thought I ever would have to make a Dugno follow us, an animal appeared that would have been helpful if it could follow us, and that was a polar bear. It was the same issue as the foxes, were lacking a lead or a resource to make them follow us. I did have an idea of popping my brain using a boat, which I definitely should have used in the fox earlier, but it turns out polar bears can't quite squeeze into one. It took me a few moments to process what this text box meant at the bottom left, but the red text was probably a hint that wasn't something coming with good intentions. So I ran for cover in the not even halfway finished structure I call home. And it was a good thing we did, as this monster party was an invasion of hostile mobs swarming all over our island. From zombies loaded with swords and armour to more strays hanging back and opening fire on me. To make matters worse, I no longer even had my trusty iron axe to defend myself with. So my battle plan consists of striking the enemy once or twice before immediately blocking myself in and eating berries to regenerate my health. I repeated this process over and over and over again. It wasn't quick, it wasn't pretty to watch, but we eventually got the result we were after. One result we were after that we also wanted to look pretty, however, was a proper well to keep our infinite water source inside of, rather than just a random hole in the ground or a random blob of blocks holding the water together. Because those 2 realities are quite the opposite of being pretty on the eye. And while the building bug was in my bloodstream, we continued to throw a few more blocks together into our home, making our walls a wee bit more formed than they were before, and adding a 2-in-1 roof for the first floor while also being a floor for the second floor. Pretty advanced stuff, I know. But a distraction occurred when the game decided to gift the Scotsman a beautiful Highland coo. It was a very neat touch and a welcome addition to our growing cow farm. However, there's absolutely nothing more beautiful than the circle of life. It's something we can't intervene in after all, and it's completely out with our hands. This totally wasn't because I was scared of me attempting to save this fox, and in the process placing the guy in the pen, we send our other one out to meet a similar fate. For the 3rd time in a row, when we're about to tick over to a new day, we finish yet another phase. The lovely hearts bleeded out from the benevolent gift before before our eyes, starting a now 40-second countdown. Yeah, I've not brought attention to it yet, but it increases to a 10-second interval for every new phase. Don't worry though, you didn't need to wait for it, but you do need to watch the start of my celebratory dance. Right, okay, as compensation, here's a wee peek at the new resource included in phase 4 called the ocean. Hold on a minute, if this is to be the equivalent of an ocean for the phase, and we have any intention of keeping the animals' 1-block supplies alive, we probably couldn't have them flopping about on land, can we? Following that, construction began on a fun wee slide to take any aquatic animals into aquarium-esque building until I found a long-term solution. Although to say this worked flawlessly as a stopgap solution would have been a very, very big exaggeration, as the 1-block was desperate to continuously show off all the faults in this design. It mainly did this by spawning a sponge block every few blocks, which of course immediately ate up all of our water path. This resulted in a long trip back and forth to the well to fix it each and every time. Turn that frown upside down though, however, as though it's time for our very first ocean animal to spawn as a turtle was birthed into the world by the 1-block. We couldn't quite put our slide into use as the big guy seemed a wee bit too big to fit in the slide, but that was no bother. We could just nudge him through land into the water, as turtles can actually survive on land, which are one of the few aquatic animals to be able to do so. So it's not as if anything go wrong. Wait, why is there a question mark at the end of that sentence? No! To avoid such a tragic incident from happening again in the future, we invested into a slope/staircase for our wood to make a slightly more convenient pushing path for any bigger future animals. At least we got to turn our frown upside down no long after, as a 1-block bestowed upon us our very first diamond, which was as good a case as any for yet another celebratory dance, despite it literally just being a singular diamond. The next aquatic animal wasn't quite a friendly one, as the guardian sprung to life and eventually landed inside of our aquarium. Considering the massive amount of damage that's carried in one of those laser beams, I wasn't in any rush to tell him to get out the water, so I kinda just left him there to despawn. The next few aquatic animals were at least a wee bit friendlier, as a pair of salmon appeared first and eventually landed in the water after a wee bit of confusion. They were closely followed by some tropical fish. Believe it or no, a penny did drop into a safer way to preserve the life of these fishes, as I trapped the tropical fish inside of a bucket. After realising this method worked, I rushed to do the same to one of the codfish that spawned earlier. However, this proved to be far easier said than it was actually done, as the guardian had been waiting for this opening, and those continuous attacks made me panic and pick up the wrong fish initially. But eventually we retrieved the cod and escaped to live yet another day. The motto "I've got to catch 'em all" continued to become even more prevalent inside of this phase, as axolotls were the next aquatic creature to appear on the island. After a wee bit of initial confusion and discovering it seemed they were okay to live on land without drowning, I made yet another bucket to preserve them while the other one enjoyed the aquarium. We finally got to rewrite the wrongs of our last turtle, and we tried to put the sins that were crawling up our back to rest, as using our new staircase made the journey to the aquarium far easier than the last time I attempted this treacherous task. However, with each new aquatic creature was putting more and more stress on our iron supply, as I was now running out of iron completely just making more buckets. I opted to make a small individual glass bowl-esque build in the first floor of our home to trap some of these creatures, even though it looks nothing like a glass bowl as it's not a circle and we're playing a block game, but you know, it's whatever. This was going to store some of the creatures in a safer secluded area. The greatest spawn from the infinite block to date was brought into our world, as the majestic sparkling glowing of the squid has descended into our realm and meant the absolute world to me. I of course valued his opinion on the aquarium, so I rushed down to greet it with open arms into the water. However, that opinion was never heard, because some twisted and evil creature who knew nothing but chaos decided to dig its teeth into the poor glowy squid. It wasn't long before it was ripped to pieces in front of my eyes. I was distraught. Hurt, upset, but most overpowering of all, I was angry. Angry at the world, angry at my own lack of knowledge, but furious with this monstrous creature that presented itself with such a cute, friendly persona. It had become personal between me and this axolotl now. I rushed to capture it, I had tunnel vision of throwing it overboard, letting it suffocate in the void, suffer just as the squid did. But that wasn't going to solve anything. So I held fire. I had to accept and burden this grief on my shoulder as part of me from this point forwards. Oh, if only I had a note from a land unknown to make this pill easier to swallow. Wait, what do you mean there's a note? That's not possible. Unblock isn't sentient. It doesn't know the lore. What does this book contain? I guess there's only one way to find out, but this is just strange.
You read that right! That's a message from me, Blue Toad! If you don't subscribe and get PablosPassions to 1,000 subscribers before the end of the year, I will sing every Christmas carol at your front door at 2 o'clock in the morning in the summer. So what are you waiting for? Subscribe now!
For the sake of my voice and your ears, let's just put that book away and never look at it again, please. Anyway, it's time to go back to the new aquatic animals that are appearing. It's time for another encounter. This time it was a pufferfish that's appeared from the 1 block, which if you didn't ken already, it's actually poisonous to even be around one. And I'll tell you for sure, this polar bear certainly didn't ken that was acting on survival instinct to kill this pufferfish, as it was poisoning the polar bear. This you're sending a loop of poisoning the polar bear even more, but thankfully for both parties we did craft up a bucket eventually and got the pufferfish inside of it. Although the poor polar bear is now staring into the sunset, living one wrong step away from death now with only half a heart to its name. There was no time to rest however, as another monster party was fast approaching. I doubt they're going to have any gifts for us. But surprisingly they did arrive completely neutral to us, which certainly was the on my bingo card. However, just because they weren't violent and trying to hit me with a trident didn't mean they were angels filled with joy and whimsy, powered with pure kindness in their heart. It didn't take long for them to show their mean-spirited nature, squashing my beautiful harvest of food. And that simply wasn't going to be acceptable whatsoever. It really is starting to set in just how many aquatic based animals there are in Minecraft, as yet another unique one sprung to life from the 1 block, with tadpoles covering the land. Closely following them was a familiar face to one that we hold in our hearts. Unlike their predecessor though, they did get the opportunity to live in the aquarium and tell me what they think of it. The next few days proved to be quite busy. I was locked in on a building project. The project that every Sky Island adjacent challenge needs to have up and running sooner rather than later. That project is of course a mob spawner. It was entirely based on a tutorial from Dr. Red, who will have their channel and the video and user's reference in the description of this video. As smooth as it was following the tutorial, my own incompetence set me back a tad while I was gathering more wood. You see, I kinda left the roof completely unlit and the mobs spawned and spawned and spawned with no place to fall as the build wasn't complete. Eventually, one misfire shot and a creeper destroyed the centre as a setback for us to manage. But finally, as the evening of day 23 came to be, the deed was done and we got to fall with our boat in style back to the floor feeling like a champion. The mob farm itself worked perfectly, but one issue was apparent nearly immediately, and that was that I couldn't possibly do my normal daily routine tasks and focus on the infinite block if I had to retrieve the mob drops every few seconds. And I couldn't leave the mob drops, of course they would despawn if I left them for too long. A single hopper was the only solution I could muster up to at least act as some sort of insurance before turning our attention to the final blocks of the ocean phase, which brought up 2 different sensitive subjects. First an axolotl, which certainly wasn't going to repeat history, and second was another collection of turtles which were safely transported into the aquarium by the ever reliable staircase. Sure enough, it was time for the curtains to come to a close. The benevolent gift had appeared, which means the ocean phase is now over. As a reward we got a very powerful trident and an intriguing spawn egg before starting a now 50-second countdown for phase 5 to get up and running. We came to learn this was called the jungle, and it took me a wee while to actually get the initiative to get a wee hint from what was coming my way from the infinite block help menu. If you thought 1 Minecraft hour a delay to take the initiative of opening the help menu for a hint was bad, what if I said it took a further 2 Minecraft days for me to even dig my teeth into these new resources the infinite block was waiting to provide us with, as the house was definitely needing a few more blocks thrown together on top of it. After testing the 1 block's patience to start this phase properly, I decided the appropriate response was to test ours as well, by spawning the most rebellious parrot to tame the world has ever seen. Eventually this gluttonous beast was satisfied, although it took far more seeds than I'm ever willing to admit. Just as I thought it was time for a well-earned break, a door-to-door salesman appeared with a tempting deal in our favour. So you already ken this is a video game and no real life. We gave him some bottles of our famous water in return for some emeralds, and we got a cool achievement to commemorate our first ever villager trade. We followed this up with our first ever encounter with a mob who visually has many similarities to a villager, and that is a witch. Throwing their dangerous potions had deadly effects on those it land on, and I don't say deadly lightly, as the panic of the poison setting in caused the panicked door-to-door salesman to launch their friend off the island into the void. To cheer us up, a skeleton decided to surprise us. Didn't exactly cheer me up, but it did distract me, as I was now hyper aware and couldn't possibly let another mob fall from my half-finished roof to gain advantage on me again. What's with these question marks? Wait, no! Pandas. Pandas are a great thing, aren't they? Let's just focus on pandas instead. Wow, a panda. That's just unbelievably cool and awesome, right? Okay, side note, how on earth does this fit in a boat but the polar bear didn't? How does that make sense? It doesn't make sense at all. They're both the same size. Anyway, now that we're like happy and sane, I'm sure I'm not going to be reminded of the horrors of the world immediately. Oh, parrots are back. 3 unique ones too. All to be fed with more seeds and more bone meal from our farm. Oh, more fun. Yay! I know it sounds like I'm over exaggerating, but there was another reason why I was so annoyed when I was recording this bit. As I didn't bring it up at the time, but I kind of forgot to pick up dark oak saplings when I mined down the tree, and I'm left with only 3 and cannot grow anymore. This reality of losing a once mainstay renewable resource gave me some motivation for another building project. So we spent the next few days committed to building a secluded tree farm where I can separate trees / saplings by their type to make sure I always have eyes capitalise on how many saplings are left by having their chest directly at the farm. Now that we have a good grip on our wood again, it's time to spruce up the mob farm, pun intended, by transforming it into a toad house with a very big chimney. Stripping the birch wood took quite a while for the bottom half, but the top half took so long to gather up its resource that we have to put this build on the back burner for now. This is because spending the entire day sitting inside a sheep pen waiting for them to grow back their wool is a very mind-numbing task that I couldn't commit to for much longer. Can I count the frog as another aquatic animal? It's up for debate, but it's what I'm used to saying at this point when a new animal appears. And if tadpoles are counted, then surely by proxy a frog would count. But it's not something I'm actually going to lose any sleep over. What I could lose sleep over is trying to navigate these snow foxes into a shelter now that I've got a lead. They are just so determined to run out of the gate while the other one walks in. I had to make an incredibly unappealing staircase roof drop system just to make it work in the end. And it was not my favourite activity in the world whatsoever. I'll tell you what also isn't my favourite activity in the world, and that is a monster party. More specifically, one including Vexies. It's a combination that's guaranteed to get me vexed. Wait, is that why they're called that? There's no time to think about that, however, as I was scrambling, panicking, and even poisoned, yet still hadn't found a tool in my inventory to use as a weapon against these dangerous mobs that were out for blood. The stone pickaxe saved us in the end, as every other tool just seemed to break and break and break. Our continuous internal motto of gotta catch them all was actually recognised and rewarded by the game, after we got an achievement for getting each frog variant led on a lead. Our entire time was taken up with two tasks at this point of just mining the one block and shearing the sheep. We were so locked in we actually ended up finishing the entirety of the jungle phase. A singular diamond in the benevolent gift was our peace offering in return for waiting patiently for an entire minute to see phase number 6 begin. This phase was called the Red Desert, and it's one of the most important phases we've reached so far, as it actually introduces us to villagers. You're going to have to contain your excitement though, as we finally found ourselves in a fool to finish off the toad house, which we made to be a blue toad house purely as a reference to the silly bit from earlier, and also because I really like Blue Toad. And why isn't he a Mario Kart, huh? You had different coloured Yoshis and Birdos and Shy Guys, but not Toad favorites, Nintendo. Why isn't Blue Toad a Mario Kart? As part of the interior decorating process, we also had a few more hoppers at the mod farm, so we no longer had any risk of losing and wasting any resources from the mob drops themselves. While I was getting the birch logs for the toad house, I actually collected all the other wood at the same time, and it was finally time to put them all to use. We got to use our experience in the staggered slab staircase, and it made this attempt a breeze to complete. Wow, would you believe it's a total coincidence that I'm segueing into saying that farming a coal-based block like snow was not a breeze at all to collect? You see, you've got to remember every snow layer that I mine is just a single snowball, and I need 4 snowballs just to make one block of snow. See this big platform I'm making that you can see on screen on replay mode? It's actually a 33 by 37 platform, which would normally make it 1,221 blocks of snow. But to give it a wee bit of a fairer assessment, I will not include the wooden slabs that replace needed snow at the connecting portion. So that leaves us actually with 1,214 blocks of snow. But that's not how many blocks we mine, because we have to times this number by 4 because of the method of collecting snow. So to build the platform for the build I'm about to talk about, not even the build itself, I had to mine at minimum 4,856 layers of snow, constantly breaking shovels. You've also got to remember, I didn't have infinite cobblestone, so it wasn't even insta mining layers. It was a wooden shovel for the majority of breaking these snow layers. Oh yeah, also the build I was building was a castle. I should probably move on to that, shouldn't I? I also kind of didn't hit start recording on replay mode until the basic foundations were built. The idea was to have this castle at the highest point of our island, and any villagers that spawn from this new phase were to stay here for their safety. It was honestly a really fun texture palette to work with all different types of wood. Splosh is the word I want to use to describe it, but I didn't care if it's actually a real word, and I'm pretty sure it isn't. But you know what I mean by that pattern. It's like paint's been put in a paintbrush and it's just been flicked towards the canvas, and it's just a bunch of random combination of wood and not in even corresponding order. What I am sure of, however, is that I'm pretty fed up of being halfway through these 100 days and still those pesky temporary housing for the animals are still being used. So let's actually start working on a wee farm area. Although we didn't get to work on it for very long, as a tragic, incredibly emotional arc was about to begin, as I was about to spend so much time bone mealing a jungle sapling, just to cut it down and pray that the drop rate lands our way, as we desperately need to get at least one sapling, but preferably more than one. As it turns out, having a tree farm with a roof using jungle saplings is a surefire way to make them nearly go extinct. eventually we got a better grip in the situation and could actually continue working on the farm area. It was time to separate our crops and start the process of growing grass for our sheep pen, as we not only needed grass at the ground of the sheep within the pen, but we also needed grass out with the fences for it to grow back if the sheep managed to eat every patch of grass. Just because the sheep pen need a wee bit of planning and preparation to move into their pen inside this farm area doesn't mean the same logic applies to the other animals. Cows were the first one up to escape their temporary housing and be given a little more room to wander about in, although I very quickly started to regret this diagonal narrow path to enter each sectioned off area, as the animals' pathfinding laws just couldn't seem to grasp it at all and continued to get trapped on every single fence. Although despite this massive recent investment of woods into this farm area, the era of temporary housing wasn't close to being over, as the one block continued to gift us more and more animals, with llamas and camels being introduced to our land. To make up for this extra stress in our resource, we'd get yet another diamond. And arguably the greatest resource we have today is a villager. More specifically, it's a villager who's named Fernando and who gets to be the very first of hopefully many to be welcomed into our castle. They even got a fancy car ride into the castle gates before being shown into their new permanent accommodation. Fernando quickly got a named friend from the one block called Irina, who was another wandering trader. And just like the last wandering trader, they offered emeralds in return for the famous one block bottled water. Because of these back-to-back very similar faces, the very next similar face I welcomed was initially with open arms. By the time I processed what was happening though, it was far too late for me. In just 2 swift strikes, I was done for. The Vindicator wasn't even vindicated enough with just 1 kill and was still waiting for me at my door for yet another one. I used the tried and trusted method of simply blocking myself into my house and slowly poking away at it with my sword. The one block tried to cheer us up by giving us a few more new animals, but to be honest I just lost nearly 20 levels of experience and I wasn't very impressed regardless. A cow variant was the very first animal to spawn into this world, not immediately be thrown into some temporary housing. It instead got a luxurious stay in our farm area. If I couldn't handle this phase's random mob spawns, what chance do I have fighting against a party of monsters causing chaos? Thankfully no Vindicators got an invite to this party, but that didn't stop me from going down to 2.5 hearts and having to tower up to one block for safety to even survive this attack. Despite the scare, we eventually managed to finish off the remaining members of that monster party. And as a reward, we not only got a new pig from the one block, but we also got our second villager. Although this villager wasn't quite on board about the idea of moving to the castle and seemed far more interested about the inner workings of our blue toad house. Eventually, with a wee bit of convincing, they came to their senses and were welcomed into the castle gates. You're about to see the next few days fly by, but trust me, it's for a very good cause. I finally sat down and moved every single animal outside of their temporary house and into the actual farm area. Sure, some animals pose some challenges, like the camels walking over fences and being too tall to go under the house to even walk on the original farm path. Goats were needing a roof to avoid them escaping with their massive jump height. Foxes need to be completely excluded from certain animals and a roof added on so they don't hunt them down. But overall it was a task well worth our time. That's partly because the temporary housings are a massive eyesore, but the other logistical reason is that I needed the platform for something else entirely. I needed a large area to keep a secluded spot to set up some beds to start producing more villagers. This of course means Bob and Fernando had to be escorted out the beautiful castle gates and be given a few carrots and left to their own devices. As we return to phase 6 once again, our one last surprise to show us before we finished it off as a Vindicator once again spawned. But we dealt with enough of them by now to know how to manage the situation, eventually dealt with it before finishing phase 6 in its entirety. A 70-second countdown now awaited us before phase 7 begun. It was called the Nether. Although I actually didn't check what was included this time in the chat. I've went through like the entire recording, I just didn't check it for whatever reason. But I'm sure you can make a few good guesses on what mobs and items are available if this entire phase is based on Dimension of the Nether. Such as ancient debris is now available to us for netherite, although we didn't have a smithing template so we can't use it, so it's just kind of a sort of, hey look what we have that we can do nothing with, but it looks cool. What isn't cool is having a hoglin spawn from the one block, as when you couple their weird knockback effect if they do land at hitting you along with a void right below our world, it is a very dangerous combination. Thankfully though, as we're in the overworld and know the Nether, they didn't stay as hoglins for long and eventually turned to zoglins. One Minecraft resource you didn't normally think twice about, we finally got over halfway through our 100 days, and that was sugarcane. A chest spawn containing it inside of this phase, and we could finally start up a sugarcane farm up to day 66. Something you didn't normally see in a regular Minecraft playthrough is a strider in the overworld. Just look at the poor wee guy, he's so scared of everything ever. He of course got a first class accommodation or farm area and was treated like royalty. To say every new nether creature was to be treated as such would be a massive exaggeration. At least one singular ghast didn't pose too many problems, and it was the very first time I actually got the achievement of bringing a ghast to the overworld in a vanilla-esque world, I guess. I mean, it's not really vanilla, but I would say it's vanilla. What wasn't my first time ever doing in Minecraft was making an enchantment table, as getting some better gear was going to be very necessary, as the nether has some very difficult mobs to deal with. Despite us having nearly infinite leather with our bones from the mob farm being able to bone meal the wheat, we kinda use the same method on a sugarcane, instead have to wait for that to grow to craft more books to actually get some higher level enchantments. At least while we were waiting, we realised that the villager farm had actually turned into an iron golem farm, and this was giving me far more consistent returns of iron than I've ever got from the one block. However, there's some things in life that no matter how physically strong you gear and portray yourself up to be, that will just remain vulnerable. Stuff that you leave open for all to see purely out of the love you carry for it. After all, why should it have to be shunned and hidden away because of the potential of one bad actor? I could have been in full netherite to fight back against this monster party. Yeah, it wouldn't have mattered, as the target was never me. It was just to keep me distracted, while the very foundation of the life I had formed here was burning up. The blaze was the first of the party to open fire on that foundation. Our blue toad house, made exclusively with wool and wood, was burning before our eyes. We had a far different battle to fight than normal, and it was a losing battle. All we could do was refuse to succumb to the wound and take stock once it had eventually stopped bleeding. The next few days were spent trying to gather up all the materials to rebuild what had been lost. Of course, it wasn't to be rebuilt as a perfect replica, but the scars remain of its past, and personally I think that makes it all the more beautiful. What isn't beautiful is the one block throwing a blaze right back into our face upon return to it once again. Although to give its credit, at least gift us the elemental power that caused the destruction in the first place, as we got our first instance of lava, more specifically in a bucket. We used this to put together a wee contraption to start collecting multiple lava source blocks. And in the process, we also got to encounter a zombie villager that would be very useful later on. With that, the nether phase drew to a close as we were greeted once again with a benevolent gift. We waited for an 80-second countdown this time to start the idle phase, which, if you're still keeping count, is phase number 8. And just like the beginnings of many phases before, we did something completely different instead of interacting with it right away. We actually finished off our house. I know it is the most stunning build you've ever witnessed in your— no. The most stunning build the universe has ever witnessed in its lifetime, with its idea being to include blocks from each and every phase in a random combination. It represents the different cycles of the one block. This was also filmed in April, well before the concept was also shown in Past Life by like 4 different people, so please, I was cool and hip first. Anyway, I actually had to look up what the phrase idle even meant, and it seems to be a sort of calm before the storm. So I think this is a phase that sort of includes all the miscellaneous nature blocks that wouldn't have made sense to have right at the start of the game. And also it's the calm before the storm of our final phases, which will be obviously in the lead up to fighting the Ender Dragon. One of these miscellaneous nature things was bees being introduced to our islands, which of course, considering I present myself as a bee, I kinda had to give them a home. So I trapped all the bees I could on a lead and tried to keep them safe, and quickly realised that every bee nest that was spawning from the one block was actually angering the bees when I broke it to continue the one block cycle. It was pretty much running back the wet sponge phase of the ocean one, when instead of just going back and forth to a well to fill it up again, I had to walk away from the bees and wait for them to not be aggroed against me. Because of this, making them a wee home was even more of a top priority, so off I went to make the best interpretation of a circle possible in Minecraft, before starting the slow process of making some glass to make the build see-through while keeping the bees inside of it. Although I quickly realised that 90% of my time spent on that circular platform was a complete waste of time, and it actually had to be ripped up and replaced with dirt / grass so I can place flowers and other nature things inside the bees' enclosure. Sadly, dirt is a scarce resource in a challenge like this. If only there was a way to craft dirt. Would you believe me if I said there was? Yeah, I have a use case for coarse dirt that's actually incredibly productive. By throwing 2 gravel and dirt together on a crafting table, you get 4 pieces of coarse dirt. However, if you use a shovel on this and then mine it, it returns to just regular original dirt. So you can technically turn 2 dirt to 4 dirt at the cost of 2 bits of gravel, which in our situation is a deal worth taking. It's a good thing we have a nice collection of gravel from the cave / mining phase. I don't know what I would do if something happened to it. No! It genuinely took about half a Minecraft day to even put my stuff back inside the chest, before I could finally go and tackle the problem at its source, and make sure if I'm gonna have a flat bit on my roof, it has to be lit up with torches. Sadly, the creepers were obviously against this idea, and fighting them on a narrow platform like this when fronting my literal house's leverage wasn't a tempting encounter. Instead, I tried to carefully lead them away and eventually spleef them into the void, as they couldn't blow up that way, so it could only lead to good outcomes, right? Oh, how I wish that was true. Oh, how I wish that was true. Oh. I couldn't even get revenge by the time I actually respawned either. It was morning, the monsters had already disappeared. I guess there was this small victory that meant I could freely light up the roof, but in all honesty, I was really genuinely upset. With the chest explosion and this happening pretty much back to back, knowing I had basically 30 days to not only get my stuff back, but beat pretty much 3 full phases, and defeat the Ender Dragon before I even talk about all the building projects I still want to finish. For example, the B area, that's not even halfway finished yet. I was starting to question and wonder, was I even gonna have the time to beat this challenge? And that thought honestly just killed my motivation for the day as I logged off. Did I even want to continue? Would I rather keep this world as just the happy memories I have out of it in my mind? Is it easier to never face the truth? To hide myself away from that responsibility? Is it easier to let the guilt subconsciously eat away at me for eternity and never let my mind find closure? I thought it through, and that wasn't a path I wanted to follow. I had to burden this as part of me and press forward yet again, as it was time to get up and face the music. Sure, it wasn't immediately, but I did find the courage to log back onto the world. And after a wee bit of preparation, I managed to find some makeshift armour to approach the next wee bit of the phase. As part of our new lease on life, we actually saw something beautiful in our first ever animal spawn in the phase since the last incident. And that was a zombie horse. A horse who kept living. It looked and continued to live in the sun while saying not today. It does not succumb. Despite everything in nature about its zombie part saying this horse should not be here. It should just be burning to a crisp. It will not succumb. Just like how we won't. As we finished up the bee area design, although worryingly I don't have a beehive yet, and fought an exclusively filled bee monster part and had to murder each and every single one of them before finishing off the phase entirely. There was a few fun things in this benevolent gift chest, but most importantly was a cherry tree sapling, as the entire bee area was actually built with the cherry logs that the one block gave us before this point. Anyway, it was time for a 90-second countdown now before we actually begin phase 9. With a name like Desolate Land for phase 9, including all these scary mobs in that list, we absolutely have to gear up as our current gear is just not up to scratch. With 21 days left to go and no consistent way of getting better resource for gear concerning the random nature of the one block, it was time to use our secret weapon, the Trading of the Villagers. I had 2 enchantment books of mine that I had to get. One felt necessary if we ever want to be strong enough to survive against our upcoming opponents. It wasn't actually an enchantment that improved our protection or anything, but psychologically having mending made us stronger than you could imagine. Especially as it took barely any time at all to get. However, the other enchantment, I can't say the same for. Well, okay, I'm exaggerating. On paper it was a full Minecraft day, however, just like the mending, it was a few Minecraft hours. As I was also on a side quest to get a beehive. However, you kinda need to have Silk Touch to mine one to collect it. But to even collect a beehive, you kinda physically have to have a beehive in front of you. But how could we possibly manage that when we're now out of the phase that even gives us beehives? Well, I actually did a bit of research before leaving that phase, and I know a solution. Did you know that if you have either an oak, a birch, or a mangrove sapling that is near a flower when it grows into a tree, it has a 5% chance of spawning with a beehive? I certainly didn't, but I certainly believe the 5% chance, as it took me forever to see one in the flesh. But when I did, it was an amazing feeling, as we could finally mark the bee area complete. What wasn't complete was a goal of getting better gear to face the new phase, with villagers still being targeted as a solution to all our problems. A blast furnace was made for this purpose to work on getting diamond armor from villagers, although a baby zombie wasn't the biggest fan of this idea and tried to get the jump on us. Thankfully, this zombie didn't hit me over the edge and we dealt swiftly with the problem at hand. Anyway, to get these diamond armor trades, we need to level up those armor villagers we got with the blast furnace, and to do so we need a ton of iron. If only we had a system in place to get iron that we could potentially make automatic and more efficient. Oh wait, They're already spawning in a breeding area, aren't they? For better or worse, work started on this iron farm without a tutorial. Okay, it was definitely for the worse. It might genuinely be the ugliest thing ever seen in Minecraft history. The random blob of blocks, the random slabs and string on the ground around it to try guarantee that iron golem spawn in the water. Weirdly, the thing I struggled most with was the hoppers, and originally set up pushing the blocks away from the chest. But eventually, after quite a few days, we cracked the code. I could let it chug away in the background as we slowly made our way through the phase once again, just to keep pace with the timer. All we could do was hope to not see the scarier mobs that were on that list earlier, which surprisingly worked well to begin with, as friendly poisonous spiders appeared first. However, a charged creeper was close to follow, which I obviously kept a good bit of distance away before attempting to eliminate it. Finally, arguably the scariest of this trio is the Vexies, as their constant wind charges on a small platform like this with a void below isn't exactly the best arena to pick a fight with them. I was left very frightened after that encounter and decided a better use of my time would be to increase my emerald output. Considering we had near infinite bone meal due to our mob farm loot that we've not even put a small dent into yet. That meant trading carrots for even more emeralds seemed like a no-brainer, as the mission to get Fernando to the highest villager level possible was in our sight. Our production of carrots proved to be too much for just one villager, so the only logical solution was to have two making the exact same trades of carrots for emeralds. Using this and the iron farm loot, we quickly breezed through all the progression landmarks and got our hands on this sweet diamond armor that had eluded us to this point. Okay, it's actually no full diamond armor, you may notice, and that's because someone decided to greet us after hearing that we're actually feeling incredibly confident. All of a sudden, I was back to feeling frightened all over again, with the choice of fight or flight was prompted to my brain. There was only one decision that I was ever going to go with. Picking off the warden from afar appeared to work to begin with, until it clocked me I had half of my health in one singular hit. By the time I healed up, it had gone into hiding. I slowly built up the courage to scout out the island, however I probably should have snuck down to the floor of the castle rather than jumping off in a dramatic heroic fashion, as this immediately alerted someone to my position, and well, as you've already seen, the rest was kind of history. Even after death, there was no rest, however, as I quickly realised that the miscellaneous junk in my chest wouldn't be enough to even put a dent in the relentless beast. With it already starting to locate me once again, I had to come up with a new idea to face it. An idea I had, and it was so crazy, so unpredictable, so insane that I might just be our way out of this. I decided to disable the iron farm, and a mighty warrior heard my call for help. Using my leads meant it wasn't long before they were thrown into battle, Titan against Titan, Protector of Peace versus Deity of Destruction. I was a foolish man to even try bear witness physically to the fight of a lifetime, as it cost me yet another one of mine. When I returned once again, only one was left standing. The warden had been slain, as the in-game counter was edging even closer to just a single-digit countdown of days until we reached the 100. We had no gear at all and we're back to square one. So off to return to carrots we went, and we couldn't even show mercy to the species that saved our lives, as the iron farm was turned on once again. The phase actually wasn't done messing much yet, as a monster party spawned from the one block, which when considering the mobs on that list from earlier and our struggles so far sounds like the worst possible outcome. However, would you believe me if I said this was the most relaxing one in the entire 100 days we've faced? Purely because I was too far away for any of the mobs to aggro onto me by the time they spawned, and I actually just got to treat it as a wee bit of bow practice. As a reward for my sharp shooting skills, I even got a totem of undying. Anyway, back to gear progression mode with a stunning new blade. And if you're thinking the days are going by a wee bit faster now, here's to look at how many carrots have been destroyed since starting this process just a few days ago. This obviously doesn't include crafting the bone meal itself, all the different clicks it takes to actually grow a carrot, then actually destroying the carrot itself, so trust me, you're not missing any cool moments of gameplay. But what is pretty cool is the benevolent gift finally ending this deadly phase. And we even got a mace as part of the reward before starting the 100-second countdown for phase 10, which is called the end. The final phase and hurdle for us to get past. However, to be honest, this phase was really just a glorified way of giving us a bunch of ender pearls. We've proved we're strong enough in the last phase and got past the one block's strongest soldiers. This is like the beating heart area of the one block, and crawling around it was every single ender mob in the game. I mean, the endermites were made quick work of when we have the sword that sweeps when you use it. The shulkers struggled really heavily with their land when attempting to pathfind their way about, which I assume was because of the multiple bits of slabs. And thankfully the endermen weren't automatically aggroed on me upon spawning, so taking them on one at a time at my own pace allowed us to deal with each one of them very comfortably. Before we knew it, the message was there and the end was near. We had travelled all the way through that beating heart in the portal to the end dimension, and our final destination was right before our eyes. We didn't even have to save the blaze rods, as the chest from this phase straight up gave us Aya Enders, which I assume was to stop a possible soft lock. I did find out there's technically another phase after this one, which is just like an endless mode. Not the most relevant considering our mission and end goal and the time we have remaining before 100 days are up. But if we were to play for another 100 days and maybe try fighting a different boss, it could actually be relevant. That's entirely dependent on if you're interested in it though. Or maybe you have a different idea altogether for a challenge. It doesn't even have to be in this 100-day format either. Just throw it in the comments anyway. I promise every single idea will be considered. Anyway, after some final preparation and an inventory that was now the equivalent of a PvP kit you would see in some PvP focused server like a lifesteal or something. Like genuinely, I've never put so much thought into going into the end fight. I had a whole shulker filled with beds despite not having the slightest clue on the method to actually use them against a dragon. I just saw a few MCSR runs and passing and had a dream. So I thought, why no bring them along? And with that, we went through the one-way portal and there was only two possible outcomes from this point. We either live or we die. You're just gonna have to ignore how spliced these arrow shots are. I definitely have the best aim ever with a bow in history. I totally didn't give up in the end and just tower up to poke the end crystals with the tip of my sword. Getting off these towers though proved to be a problem though, as it turned out my overthinking inventory planning, I somehow didn't realise that I went dimension without a water bucket. After dealing with all the crystals, it was time to use our secret weapon that we've never wielded before this point. The power of beds. After struggling for a while to work out how I would even do it, I eventually just tried it when it perched. That method didn't quite go to plan. It actually did more damage to myself than I ever did to the Ender Dragon. Don't worry though, I'm sure next time's got to be the charm. I mean, that's the reason the saying exists. Aye, the water bucket would have been a bit useful by now, eh? Maybe I shouldn't ever put me and a PvP kit in the same sentence ever again. I mean, I have full enchanted diamond armor with golden apples and I'm still popping a totem no even halfway through the dragon fight. I tried to play even safer and use a bow and I end up somehow shooting myself more than I ever shot the dragon. Eventually, the boring method returned of just bonking the dragon's head over and over with my sword. I eventually decided the time was now to give up. Overall, no the best performance I ever seen in an end fight, but the end result was all that really mattered at the end of the day, and we had the goal of defeating the Ender Dragon in 100 days, and we did exactly that. We took the egg home as a trophy back to our homeland with a few days left still to kill in this challenge. But with our final mission complete, it was time to just relax and enjoy myself. So I geared myself up with a fishing rod, decorated the old aquarium a wee bit, and let me tell you, something about the water glowed each and every night, as if something or someone was smiling upon us. Eventually, our time was up and we bid farewell to the moon. Used our last bit of fleeting energy to climb ourselves into bed. We got to rest our eyes for a full night for the very first time in our entire existence. And from this point onwards, all I can say is thank you for watching at this point. I sincerely hope you have a good day, a good night, and certainly good rest of your life. Goodbye for now.